And I think one of the biggest that everyone is sort of looking at is a shift in reward schema from being about volume of relays to being more QoS based. I've talked a lot about the fact that if you're going to have an infrastructure network, you have to use some of the same philosophies that drive traditional non-crypto based infrastructure networks, and quality of service is obviously high on those consideration lists. And we've seen that, things like relative latency between nodes are big drivers in whether or not you got relays to get rewards. But I'm of the opinion that, an approach that is scoring QoS and rewarding based on that makes a lot of sense in helping to enforce and reward like great throughput in the network. To me, that's probably about the most logical approach possible. Who's got questions related to that V10 spec? And since we've got a few folks on the call from Pocket, maybe we can talk about that for a little bit. Anyone? Okay. Well, if nobody has any questions about V10 and everybody's still chewing on that, then we can just shift right into our normal OpenO Q&A session, unless any of y'all Pocket folks have any announcements you want to get out first.
I'll just say for V1, the module that is probably the sexiest is the utility module. So Discord, there should be an events tab towards the top, or that's how I kind of orient my Discord at least. I believe the next one will be the utility one. All of the modules matter, but make sure to attend that one. Look in the best discussion.
Beautiful. Yeah, you'll see if you've been paying attention at all. Normally, there aren't much in the way of events scheduled at the top of the left side menu in Discord, but we do have a number of them lined up for deep dives into the individual modules associated with the V10 spec. This is, I think one of the most important things about the strategy in V10 is that by community opening it up to the community and open sourcing the DevOps of it to some degree and really gathering community input along the way, a lot of the things that have been less transparent or a bit of a black box, everyone really has the opportunity to participate in this process now. Which does two things. A, it gets you better information faster as opposed to guessing and, a lot of our backroom speculation. But B, it really means that if you don't like the way things are going and you haven't participated in that process to help shape how things are going, well, that's on you. This is an opportunity, I think, and a smart move by the engineering teams within Pocket to really engage the community and how the implementation of what is really going to be a fairly radical shift in how Pocket works, to let you be involved with that conversation and help shape it and guide it. And to be perfectly honest, I think it's kind of brave given how contentious we've seen some of the forum posts to be in discussing DAO proposals and such. To open source the entire development process from the perspective of engaging the community and allowing for a lot of input and or playing with the actual nuts and bolts of the code itself. There's some big opportunities there for people who are motivated. You can put your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
I'd be curious. We had someone ask in the Node Pilot Discord if there was a way that others have found to test the latency of their calls. And I know that I don't have any direct tools or capabilities at the moment to efficiently be able to gauge the latency and essentially which ultimately lands as the performance of my node. So I was wondering if anyone else in the community had ways that they've tested their call latency to kind of gauge the performance of their nodes.
We use on our bare metal nodes, we use Ben Van's Rocket script, which has a latency metric in there. I mean, I don't know how that would be incorporated into like NodePilot, for instance, but the fact that that exists means that that data is certainly in there to some degree.
What latency does it check? Does it check the latency between your node and like a gateway, or the latency of like a call from your Pocket node to an Ethereum node? What latency is it checking?
I think it says relative latency, and I think that it's checking from Pocket node to Pocket node. I know that
Pocket node to
original.
Pocket node. How does that work?
I think. Sorry for interrupting here. I think
Sure.
it's checking from Pocket core node to the node in the change JSON. I
Okay,
think that's
Right.
the latency. Yeah. So
that's
so
latency
the-
he's checking.
yeah. So I think, Shane, what you're asking is how can you measure the latency between of a request that you've served as a Pocket node?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yep.
the best way to do that will be to put of course all if I'm not mistaken, but everyone is running with reverse proxies in front. So all you have to do is basically install, if you're using Nginx or Apache, which are the most popular ones, you can install a logging plugin and basically log how much it took the server to reply to the thing and then to the request, and then all you will have to add there is network latency. The only way to actually get end-to-end full trip latency is to have access to both the client and the node, but that wouldn't be too practical, to be 100% honest.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks. That's actually a really good idea. Something I'm going to look into.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we talk about frequently is a need for some better metrics. On the node side itself, it would be great to have some real time running performance metrics. And I know that there are a lot of third-party solutions that have been developed. I mean, we've looked at like performance monitoring stuff and building out our own Grafana dashboards and that sort of thing. But there's no sense of how well that's performing from a network perspective. And I assume that once the QoS portions of the new spec are going into place, that'll all get a lot easier. But anybody who develops any sort of solution that helps determine how well you're doing, please share that out in Node Runner. We're all hungry for it, no question. So next question up.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about V1.
Mhm.
And it's regarding the payment scheme. So if V1 anticipates or envisions node runners getting paid based on the quality of their performance, is there some other mechanism to encourage or incentivize node runners to locate in low serviced areas and to prevent a situation where they just situate where costs are lowest?
You mean like as far as geographical regions go?
Yeah. I mean, what is there to incentivize a wide geographical spread of
So in the current schema, there is some incentive to locate in underserved geographical areas, because if nobody else is there to catch those relays and rewards are a function of volume of relays, then hitting an area that's dark on the map potentially gives you control of that. But with a QoS measure, then theoretically a lot of nodes would be incentivized by just the QoS measure to cluster in high performance areas with high throughput and great built out infrastructure. I can certainly see that becoming a disincentive to service sort of lesser populated areas. Thoughts on that, Pocket folks?
Yeah, I think one of the big pushes right now that I'm aware of with the tech team is, and we've all been seeing this kind of play out, is the push to more regions for the portal. So before, the portal was like 3 regions. In the past 2 months, it's gone to like now 15. So that's really heavily spread out the regions, so that nodes don't need to be clustered as much as they kind of were in earlier phases of the network. So there's a lot of kind of there's now like 15 regions that nodes essentially can cluster, but from my understanding, they're even going to be expanding that. So they're looking at other other ways to, with the portal at least, deploy the portal on other cloud providers and things of that nature, to just even create even more regions in general. So from that side, you've got a number of steps being taken, and then obviously with V1, with the QoS, as people have talked about, that's going to add a whole new level, because then through the SDK, clients can directly interface with Pocket without needing to go through a gateway, which has to be deployed in a region. It can just connect to the kind of like the closest nodes, or to it, without needing to go through a gateway. So that's when regions will really start being unlocked, is once we hit V1, and I assume after some maturing phase. But at least for now, we got 15 regions, which is already creating some separation from the original regions that were there a few months ago, and then more are going to be coming online.
I think
Thank you.
the question kind of still remains in my mind, though. If you've got, maybe there is a portal that's geographically close to everywhere, but if your portal is a long way away from the next big cluster of Pocket nodes, what's the incentive to geographically locate more Pocket nodes in closer to that individual portal? This isn't an issue so much in like places like Japan, where you've got small landmass and high, population density, therefore high traffic density. But I would think that specifically in places like Western Africa, where you have a lot of emerging economies that are really, taking to blockchain quickly, but perhaps not anywhere near as much infrastructure, the performance of Pocket in those regions might be a little more challenged.
So if I might chime in here, I think the first thing I want to do is invite you. That's a very good question, to come to the utility talk that we're having in a few weeks, or I think it's next week actually. So there's that, and then the second point, I want to bring you to your attention. I don't know if you've been able to check out the utility spec, but in the utility spec, at the chain level, as at least as currently spec, you have geozones for fishermen, service nodes, and applications, which means that it's going to become a market decision, where basically people are going to be attracted to the geographical regions that produce the most traffic. However, as with all markets, serving underserved markets first sometimes is an advantage. So it's going to take some deep analytics from the node runner community to come in and say, hey, this emerging market seems like it's going to go up. Let's deploy ahead to because by the time the other, let's say, node runner realizes that this market is becoming more efficient, economically speaking efficient, then you'll be there first, and you'll be able to take that first mover advantage. However, it has always been part of the philosophy to allow the markets to decide. Like, applications are the ones that are going to decide where the service nodes are going to be deployed, because applications are the ones producing the traffic in the first place. So I think if you take that into consideration, then yes, it's going to become a problem if we have something, for example, like, you are tied to, if you are serving an underserved geozone, then you are tied to a less efficient service. But the market is going to decide first from the node runner side if it's going to be worth it to deploy there to give you better service, or if it's going to go from the application to either move their application to a different geozone or basically grow. But that's what the markets do, like they drive the behavior of the actors in the market.
Right. Yeah, and well, I think part of the reason that there's a question about that is that the current setup where the rewards are a function of volume of relays, there's a very, very clear relationship between supply and demand that allows you to target underserved markets and reap the rewards of that. Whereas if it's just maintaining QoS, then I can have all of my nodes clustered in what is normally a high QoS area. You know what I mean?
Yes, but remember two things. First, and again, we're gonna go into all these details in the utility call, but volume is still a metric, and that will allow be a parameter how important that metric is, because now you can keep count, but you don't have to keep the way we're going to keep count is way more efficient, because we're not going to go through the whole claim and proof life cycle, because that's what on the other side the fishermen are going to do. So volume can play a role depending on how we end up structuring the numbers. And remember, still early days. This is why we're having these discussions now. So I do expect to see something like low volume geozones being less economically efficient, because even if you maintain a high quality of service at them, it will depend on how big is the percentage on volume for that geozone. You see what I'm saying? It's laid out in the numbers are not laid out in the spec, because the spec is just a mechanism. But by the time this becomes more and more concrete through time, then those numbers are going to have to be defined by the DAO. Like how important is the network going to consider volume and QoS in combination to create that pool of rewards? Because if you check out, and again, I don't want to dive too deep, but if you check the spec, there is a reason why, as currently expect, moving through geozones has an impact, and it's a decision that nodes are going to have to make. So that what that implies is that the mechanism allows, I'm not saying again, we don't have the final numbers, but the mechanism allow for geozones with low volume to be less economically free. If you maintain a high quality of service, the amount of throughput that you do in them might not guarantee. You see?
Absolutely. And I can tell you for a fact, I will be on every one of these big boy or these deep dive calls, because that's all of this is very interesting to me, and I want to make sure that I fully understand it. And I encourage everyone here to be on those calls as well. And I don't want to completely take this call off the rails into that, but I figured if we had any burning questions left over from Friday's announcement call, that we could address some of those up front. All right, next question. Do you have a question, Kai Fovo? Or are you just unmuted?
I had a question, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
So I initially saw a proposal that at total supply of 1 billion, the amount of rewards would be cut down by like an order of magnitude, right? And I guess that was just a proposal, but I was curious if there were any similar plans still out there.
So first of all, there was never a proposal around that. There was a theoretical model that was outlined. We call that the
Okay.
tempting. And we discussed that at length because it was included as part of the economics docs. So that was all that we had to go on. There have been two proposals that are out there right now in regards to inflation control. Those are PUP 11, the WAGMI inflation proposal, and then PUP 12, the stopgap. I think they called it double trouble proposal. And those are essentially two things. WAGMI PUP 11 is creating a target for inflation control by adjusting the relays per pocket parameter down around agreed upon targets over specific amounts of time. And then PUP 12, the stopgap proposal, is creating an immediate staged drawdown of rewards per node, like say over the next 6 months or so, with a stepped drawdown every 30 days. One of the things that I think that has been proposed in those conversations that I really functionally agree with is that having set targets that are just targets set in a vacuum doesn't really do a good job of addressing some of the concerns around inflation. And especially if we see, relays drop during downtimes, there gets to be a point where the ROI isn't there for the cost of covering infrastructure that's been purchased or financed, things along that line. And people who are in term agreements that were created before those reductions in rewards now are upside down in those term agreements. So, there's some concern on that front. And so I think that one of the most interesting suggestions has been to tie any inflationary control to volume of relay. And maybe that's something that can happen a little more frequently than, say a quarterly target for inflation or something along that line. I think it's something to be discussed. But the high level answer is the tempting event, I think, has pretty much been discarded at this point. I don't hear anyone advocating for it. And looking around at some of the adjustments or some of the conversation around inflation adjustments that are happening right now, a 90% reduction as outlined in that tempting model would probably freak a whole lot of people out. So, I think it's pretty safe to say that there's not any sort of broad support for that approach. Any thoughts on the proposals as they sit now, though?
I guess I wasn't even aware about the proposals, but that does answer my question, so thank you. I'll take a look.
Got it. If you haven't, make sure you check out the governance forum. All proposals are put up there for community discussion, and whether or not you're a DAO voter, and anybody who's participating in this community certainly has the ability to make their opinions known either directly in the forum if you're a member there, or in the like unofficial chats and such, like the Pocketpost done.
Got it. Appreciate it.
Next question. Got anybody out on the Twitter Spaces want to ask a question? Y'all's call, so bring it. Whatever it is. It doesn't have to be inflation or anything else. It can be strictly, why isn't my node doing better?
Hi, can I ask this might not pertain directly to this exact conversation, but I'm super new to the node world, and I've looked at different options, the Pocket Networks website, as far as running or buying nodes through third party or running your own node. I was just wondering if anybody here has experience in buying something from like Coder or the other platforms listed on the website.
I know that in unofficial chat, we answer a lot of those questions on a regular basis. And from what I've seen in conversation there, the ability to buy and sell staked nodes seems to be working well. I haven't heard or seen any complaints about it. I've never participated in that process, so I can't give like an endorsement per se. But I haven't heard anyone. The only complaints that I've heard about that process entirely are I can't get things to move as fast as I would want them to because they're so busy. So, that's about the best feedback I think I could give on that.
Perfect. Thank you. I just, first time listening in on this conversation, find it super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not in the Telegram group, Octopus Den, I mean, check it out. That is our unofficial, almost no rules conversation regarding the Pocket ecosystem and all things related to it. So feel free to jump in there as well. The only thing we stay away from is religion and politics.
There you go. Where do I find that again?
It is let's see. I'll read it out to you here. You'll just have to write it down, I suppose.
Sure.
It's t.me/unofficial POKT. Okay. And then we did have some questions come in the lobby from Addison. One is, which component of the Pocket node uses the most resources? And why do they use so many resources if it's just relaying data from the BC nodes, blockchain nodes, I assume? That would be the first one. I mean, from my experience, the biggest resource use is in read-write IOPS, the actual NVMe storage and that, the back and forth of that. But I know there are a few other folks on here who have a lot more experiences with this than I do. Y'all want to pipe in on where the biggest resource pools are?
If I could chime in there, I think I can provide an answer. As you point out, the relaying of the requests, even from let's go to infrastructure, web infrastructure basics. Opening a network connection opens a socket in the operating system. So relays scalability mostly depends on opening and closing those sockets as fast as possible. So that's why we have the ulimit calculation that you have to do in order to set the node to make sure that you have enough available pre-assigned sockets to the process so you can scale relays like that, because it's weird because at the operating system level, sockets work both for networking connections and open files. So it's sorry, okay, cool. So there's that. So that mostly explain the scalability of relaying. Then you have to take into consideration that depending on how much the relays take in the underlying relay chain, that is gonna make it so that those sockets are gonna stay open for longer. Now, as I just explained, sockets work, open files, not sockets, but open files work both for networking connections and disk read and writes. Then on top of that, you have to take into consideration that a Pocket node at all times is gossiping messages through the network, syncing blocks, sending messages and helping others sync and things like that, on top of validating transactions that coming into the mempool. It's doing everything that a blockchain is supposed to be doing, right? So that's where the resource intensive tasks are gonna be found, like File Pocket using pprof or any other Golang tooling. You'll find that not like it's a minor like relaying data is one of the minor how can I say this, consumptions of resources. It's all the blockchain activity, like being a blockchain full node, that takes over that, which is why servicing the servicer and validator split helped that, because now that there's less validators on the network, then there's less chatter for consensus. There's less processing of signatures for consensus validation and all that. So I think that answers your question.
Beautiful. And then there was a Twitter request, and then I've got a couple more questions lined up in chat right behind that. Whoever's running the Twitter spaces. Okay.
Hey, Julius, you're a speaker, but you're muted right now.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Sort of. You're a little garbled, but we'll give it.
Yeah, I'm riding through Georgia right now. We got bad reception, but previous person asked about the node hosting services. Whenever I got into Pocket, I bought 5 nodes and started using Easy2Stake, and had real good turnout with those guys, and they're pretty quick to spin up new nodes as you go. So I just want to give that out to whomever asked for that. And the other thing is, as I continue to grow my nodes, I'm up to 20 nodes now. I want to look at how to host my own on a bare metal server, but I'm having kind of problems finding out exactly what kind of hardware I need to grow my node count and eventually host my own. Is there any kind of clarity on how many, threads that you need to run a node based off of current chains available on the node Pocket?
Yeah, I know that Node
Can you
Pilot.
repeat that question? Because I mean, I don't know how everybody else was. I couldn't really hear hardly.
Yeah,
half.
It's not really coming in clear from Twitter Spaces. Not exactly sure why, but his question was he runs a bunch of nodes right now from service providers. It's been a good experience, but he wants to look more into running his own nodes, and so if there's any hardware requirements, resources out there. So. On the Node Pilot docs, we keep up to date the resources required to run a number of different nodes that are at least supported through Node Pilot. So you could actually go through and essentially calculate up, how many vCPUs you need, how much RAM you need, and things of that nature. You can kind of calculate that up to kind of see what kind of server you might need, for to manage as many nodes as you're wanting to manage. So that's a resource that's available to you, and if you're looking to self-host, Node Pilot could be a way to do that yourself, which could potentially streamline or does streamline deploying all these nodes and kind of managing Pocket nodes. So overall, at least I know for sure that Node Pilot's docs bring together a lot of that information. If there's other areas, then feel free to share if there's anyone else here who knows other areas that can help calculate up resources. But at least for Node Pilot, we have it in our docs.
I know that the increase in the spec was to 4 vCPUs. With QSpider, our bare metal, we're running 16 vCPUs. And there is a Telegram group, t.me/pocket, POKT pilots, PILOTS, where a lot of folks are talking about the specifics of individual node building and bare metal node building, especially with Node Pilot frequently on top of that. So, check out that group as well. There's a lot of good discussion there and some documentation that's being built around that. And that kind of segues or dovetails nicely with the question that was asked of would Pocket Core benefit from having a higher clock count, more cores versus faster cores? Engineer folks, y'all have any opinions on that?
So that is a a very interesting question again. Here's the thing with Pocket Core, and I might be a bit philosophical, so bear with me. But Pocket Core was built to be run as horizontally as possible in terms of infrastructure deployment setups, which means that, like, if you take a specific piece of hardware, like it's tuned for AMD whatever processor or Intel whatever server processor, then at that point in time, what you're doing is you're creating a a, a bias, right? Like a bias toward a particular cloud provider that provisions nodes for that server, or particular a hardware company, or whatever you want to call it. So and here's another thing, and this question actually has a lot to do with the V1 justification that we were mentioning last Friday, and it's the fact that yes, to some extent, having faster CPU clocks and speeds is gonna benefit you, but there is a point of diminishing returns. I'm sorry. Can you mute, please? Notepilot, there's background noise.
I think we're good.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. So, sorry, I think it's just me. So I'll just, okay, there you go. So, so what's gonna happen is that it's gonna be, you're gonna notice that it's gonna be variable. Under high relay stress load, you're gonna see that having a faster CPU is gonna help some processing of the internal databases that Pocket Core maintains for syncing blocks, for storing claims and proofs and things like that. And under less relay count, you're gonna see that that CPU requirement is not gonna be as high. As well as if you look at very heavy blocks that have a lot of claims and proofs and things like that, that is also something that is going to play a factor. So yes, to certain degree, but just throwing CPU at it, not doing any elasticity to it, it might not be the most optimum. So that's why we created the hardware recommendations that we did. And if you notice, we don't recommend any particular CPU or even architecture of CPU. So at that point in time, this is like an average out in terms of low and highs. Like what does it average to? So I hope that answers your question.
Will a lot of that change if you move away from Tendermint, which I guess is being proposed for 1.0?
So hi, thank you, Steve, for the question. For the follow, is that all right, James? If I answer that?
Yeah. No, roll with it.
Okay. So Steve, that's a great question. And as the author of the persistence spec for V1, I can tell you that a lot of the initial research that we did was precisely on this point, especially on the area of servicers. Like, why do servicers have to subject themselves to a lot of this? And the reality is that under the Tendermint ABCI architecture, you don't have much options. You'd have to tightly couple the software to the interface as closely as possible, or you risk having more moving pieces than necessary, and also added bottlenecks in terms of performance. So what with V1, what we're trying to achieve is making sure these specialized actors actually only have to manage the resources that they need to manage, not this more generic broad broad servers that we had to architect around Tendermint because we had to couple servicing and validation. So the answer is yes. In V1, we're aiming to have a resource usage coupled more closely to the specialized task, and hopefully that will give people more options around how they decide to scale their nodes.
Can I ask you one more question on this, Louis? Is that all right for the group? How is the performance of nodes? When I was reading that proposal, it looks like, and I'm not sure it's the role of the fisherman, but that there's going to be a process for monitoring node responsiveness and performance. Can you confirm or clarify that at all?
Without giving away the entire next column utility, the reality is that these fishermen are going to be nodes that act as apps. As Andrew said on last Friday's call, these nodes, the fishermen, are basically going to be nodes that are going to be authorized by the app to act as a client of the app. As you know, Pocket is built in that application level with a separation between app and client, where app is tied to the infrastructure that the app developer wants to provide its user, and the client is the actual user that is using the app. So in this particular case, the fisherman is a node that acts as a client of the app. And what ends up happening there is that the node, as that client, it can mimic app client-like behavior. And in that particular client-like behavior, it can sample how is it being serviced by the node. So basically, it's a whole process's job to see how this other process, which is another node, is handling service for the clients of my apps. So that's basically the idea. There's a lot more nuance and detail there. I invite you to join the utility call, but that is the broad idea.
It's like a secret shopper kind of.
Yes, that was the analogy that Andrew used also. A secret shopper, a secret food critic that goes into a restaurant and starts ordering and checking out the service. Like, it's the same analogy.
And then we've got two questions still from the lobby that I wanted to get in here. What's the maximum amount of time that it should take for a proof to be submitted for a claim?
I have to double check it, but Pocket Core has a mechanism so that proofs and claims also get spread out. There is a parameter though that I don't remember the number for right now. So let me get back to you on that, so I don't give you an inaccurate information. But there are two components here. There is a first component that on chain there is a expiration. Basically, there is a relative expiration time from when a claim and a proof get submitted. So if your node doesn't send claims and proofs on time, they're gonna be marked as invalid and not be accepted into the chain. So there's that one component. I can get you the. I'll write in the lobby the name of the parameters under current values, and the second component is that Pocket Core has a mechanism to take that amount and basically say in a random order, send it, and this is blocks, right? Like, send it in a random block between the moment of submission and the moment, between moment 0, which is when you can start to begin submitting this proof, to the maximum moment, which is the parameter that I just mentioned. So Pocket Core, what it's gonna do is it's gonna randomize when to send the proof based on that, so so the proof never goes late. I think it's actually less than the maximum, so to allow for retries, but I can get you the exact numbers as well. But that's how the mechanism works.
Beautiful. And then the last question that we had from out there was, what does it take to transfer pocket nodes? Does the key just have to be in set validator with the DNS pointed to the machine, or are there other logs and data store that don't allow you to change this instantly?
I guess I can take this one too. So sorry about that. If not, if anyone else wants, I'll give my turn.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't hear anybody else jump up to answer.
Okay, cool. So so here's the thing. The answer is that it depends. If you're running a validator, there's one set of things that you have to check. If you're running a servicer, meaning a node that is not in the top 1000 state, it's a simpler process. The reason for this is that you also have to remember that these nodes are peers in a peer-to-peer network. So in the case of validators, these nodes have to make sure that they don't get jailed. So but at the same time, you don't want to double sign blocks. You don't want to double sign blocks. You don't want to have two of the same peer in the network, because that's going to start making your node fail and messages becoming invalid and so on and so forth. So what you want to do is basically, if you're a validator, you want to make sure that the new node, like imagine you copy over the data there and the data there, yeah, that's it. And you have this node running in a different, and all you have to do is make the DNS change to point the service URL to this node. Then what you want to do is basically shut down the initial node and get that node up with the same set of keys and the same set validator, as you mentioned, the same key files basically in the data there, to make sure, and then make the DNS switch, which is sometimes is not instant, which I will understand is a little bit less convenient. But that way you will ensure that your node doesn't get jailed. If you're a servicer though, the peer-to-peer component is not gonna be as strict, because you're not validating blocks, you're not participating in consensus. So all you have to do is copy the data there, set the new, basically do exactly the same process, but there's less timing restriction. Just take into consideration that every relay that you fail or that you're offline for is one relay that you're not going to get paid for. Also, you have to take into consideration that inside of the data there's multiple databases, and one important database is the Pocket Evidence DB, which is the one that Pocket Core uses to store all the relays in the form of the to be able to process the claims and proofs. So you have to make sure that these evidence DB actually matches up. So if you're if it were me, I will wait for a session to end and shut down my node, or make it not accessible, to make sure that the evidence DB is gonna be as clean as possible. I don't think there's gonna be a problem if you don't do this, but I think this is the safest way of doing it. And then copy over that same DB to your new machine, set up your new process, change your DNS, and then you're gonna start receiving relays to the new machine, and now everything should be all right.
Beautiful. I think, I mean, that sounds like a very comprehensive answer to the questions. So hopefully everybody who was sending me chats and DMs with questions to ask, we got your questions answered well enough. And big thanks, Luis, for being on today and providing some senior engineering perspective. It's always nice to have some of the big guns in here helping to answer questions and such. Unless anybody has one last quick question, we are at the bottom of the hour now, so I think we're going to be wrapping it up. I'll give about 15 seconds to see if anybody's got a quick one. Well, I'm not seeing anybody scrambling for the mute button, so I think that wraps us for this week. All of the events for this Discord, including the weekly Node Runner office hours, and more importantly, each of those 4 module deep dives are in the events section at the top of the left side menu in Discord. So get in there, get RSVP'd. You don't want to miss those calls. If you have these kinds of questions about how nodes work and how to optimize for best performance on the network and all the rest of that, you would be doing yourself a disservice to miss some of the expertise that's coming out in these upcoming calls. So get RSVP'd and make sure that you're there. Aside from that, though, we are done with this week's Node Runner office hours, and I'll see y'all next Wednesday.